From Bloody Times, The Funeral of Abraham Lincoln and the Manhunt for Jefferson Davis, guided close read. The capital of the Confederacy, originally located in Montgomery, Alabama, was moved to Richmond, Virginia in June of 1861. The residents of Richmond were used to threats of possible invasion by Union forces, but they had such confidence in General Lee that they believed it wouldn't happen. Lee had warned President Davis weeks before that Richmond might soon be lost. And although Davis evacuated his own family, the general public suspected nothing. It was the sight of fires in front of the government offices that led many to wonder what was happening, as officials burned government records. When authors contrast individuals, ideas, or events, they explain how they are different. Sometimes two subjects can be contrasted within a single paragraph. Reread lines 15 through 21. Describe the contrast that Swanson draws between Abraham Lincoln and Jefferson Davis. Pause while you think. While few people had heard of Lincoln in 1858, many recognized the name of Jefferson Davis and were aware of his leadership potential. When authors compare individuals, ideas, or events, they explain how they are similar or alike. Two subjects can be compared within one paragraph or in separate paragraphs. Reread lines 65 through 75. Identify details in the paragraph that show how Lincoln and Davis were similar. Pause while you think. They both loved books and reading. They both had children who died young. They both fell in love young with women who became ill and died. Although some words may have a similar denotation or dictionary definition, they can have very different connotations, the feelings or ideas associated with the word. Words can have a positive, neutral, or negative connotation. Reread lines 78 and 79. Find the word convince. What are some other words that have a similar denotation or dictionary definition? Pause while you think. Some possible responses: coax, coerce, persuade, pressure. How does the author's use of convince impact the sentence differently than words such as coerce or pressure? Pause while you think. Words such as coerce or pressure have a negative connotation and would give a poor impression of Davis's behavior. When authors contrast subjects, they explain the ways in which they are different. Sometimes a contrast is made in two separate paragraphs, with one paragraph covering various aspects of the first subject and the next paragraph covering similar aspects of the second subject. Reread lines 100 through 116. Contrast Davis's and Lincoln's views on slavery. What were Davis's beliefs about slavery? Pause while you think. He believed that white people were superior to blacks, that slavery was good for blacks, and that the founding fathers had intended slavery to be part of America forever. How were Lincoln's views different? Pause while you think. Lincoln thought slavery was simply wrong, and that the founding fathers hadn't intended it always to exist. He was willing to allow slavery in states where it was already legal, but didn't want it to spread to new states. Imagery is descriptive language that appeals to one or more of the five senses: sight, hearing, smell, taste, and touch. Imagery helps readers imagine or form an image of what is being described. Reread lines 134 through 145. What descriptive details help you imagine the scene in Richmond the morning of April 2nd, 1865? Pause while you think. The words beautiful and serene, air smelled of spring, fresh green growth, a perfect Sunday of the southern spring, a large congregation, all support readers in creating a mental image. What impact does the description have on the tone of the selection? Pause while you think. The imagery provides a stark contrast to the references to war, such as the horrors of fighting in lines 133-134. An author's purpose is his or her reason for writing. Attend to General Lee's telegram to General Breckinridge. Reread lines 151 through 157. Which words and phrases show the dire circumstances facing Richmond? Pause while you think. Lee writes that he sees no prospect of doing more than holding our position, and that he is not certain that I can do that. How does the telegram better support the author's purpose of informing readers about the fall of Richmond than a description of the event? Pause while you think. The note provides the exact words of a key historical figure. It is a powerful statement of the danger the city faces. The text in lines 199 through 219 helps us understand that Jefferson Davis was now aware that both he and the Confederacy were in danger. Reread lines 199 through 219. Identify details in the text that signal how serious Jefferson Davis thought the situation was. Pause while you think. He insisted his family evacuate Richmond and told his wife, "If I live, you can come to me when the struggle is ended." He gave his wife a gun and virtually all of their money. He looked and acted as though he was seeing his family for the last time. What is the impact of these word choices? Pause while you think. The personal details about Davis and his family suggest the impact that the defeat of the South will have on individuals rather than the larger political implications for the South. President Lincoln was known for telling stories. He could use a story to make an analogy or a comparison between two things that are alike in some respect. Reread lines 232 through 253. Why does Lincoln tell the story about the lemonade? Pause while you think. He tells the story to address indirectly the question of how to treat Jefferson Davis. What analogy does General Sherman think Lincoln is making? Pause while you think. He believes Lincoln is comparing himself to the man in the story who wouldn't mind having brandy in his lemonade so long as he didn't have to add it himself. Sherman understands that Lincoln feels it is fine to let Davis escape and disappear, but is unable to issue the order himself or be directly involved. An author contrasts people, ideas, or events by explaining how they are different. Remember that a contrast can be made in two separate paragraphs, where the first paragraph describes aspects of one subject and the second paragraph describes similar aspects of another subject. Reread lines 271 through 285. Contrast the moods and actions of Richmond's residents. How are most people feeling and behaving? Pause while you think. They are despondent as they try to protect their belongings and flee the city. Did not line the streets to cheer, hiding their valuables or fleeing. How is the black population feeling and behaving? Pause while you think. They are happy, congratulating one another and praying for the arrival of the Union soldiers. The mood was happy, a day of jubilation. Remember that a word's denotation is its dictionary definition, while its connotations are the ideas and feelings associated with the word. Reread lines 295 and 296. Find the word common. What are some other words with a similar denotation? Words like ordinary, regular, standard, inferior, or low class have a similar dictionary definition to common. What is the impact of the author's choice to use common rather than words such as inferior or low class? Pause while you think. Those words have a negative connotation and would give a worse impression of Davis's travel accommodations. Swanson shows us a stark contrast in the way groups of people experience ongoing events. Reread lines 366 through 388. Contrast the mood and actions of the government officials with that of Richmond's residents. How are the government officials reacting? Pause while you think. The text evidence. Trying to brighten the mood. Hope and good humor were inexhaustible. A playful air. How were the people of Richmond feeling and behaving? Pause while you think. Text evidence. Endured a night of terror. Ruins and smoke presented a terrible sight. A mob gathered, half-starved. What do these contrasting reactions suggest about each group's situation? Pause while you think. Government officials are headed toward relative safety, while the people of Richmond continue to fear for their lives, either from starvation or from the impending invasion of enemy troops. Imagery is descriptive language that appeals to the sense of sight, hearing, smell, taste, or touch. Remember that imagery helps readers form a mental picture of what is being described. Reread lines 414 through 421. What descriptive details help you imagine events in Washington, D.C. on April 3, 1865? Pause while you think. Text evidence. Joyous mood, blaze of excitement and enthusiasm, thunder of cannon, ringing bells, eruption of flags from every window and housetop, shouts of enthusiastic gatherings. Compare this description with the description of Richmond in lines 394 through 402. Pause while you think. Text evidence. Worn out with fatigue and fright, extinguishing the flames. How do the contrasting images affect the meaning of the text? Pause while you think. The images reinforce the idea that victory for one side means destruction and desolation for the other. In lines 458 through 463, we contrast the people's reaction to President Davis as he leaves Richmond with the reception he receives the next day in Danville. Reread lines 458 through 463. How did the citizens of Danville respond to Davis when he arrives? Pause while you think. A large crowd cheers him. Families open their homes to him and other government officials. How is this different from the response he received as he left Richmond? Lines 272 through 276. Crowds did not line up to cheer for him or offer words of encouragement. Many were in the process of fleeing the city themselves. In lines 495 through 501, we're going to identify sensory details used to describe Lincoln's approach to Richmond. Reread the paragraph that begins on line 495. What sensory details does the author use to describe what President Lincoln saw and heard as he arrived in Richmond on a boat? Pause while you think. Sight. Looked eerie. Saw no one. Smoke from the fires. Street along the riverfront was deserted. Sound. Creaking of the oars. How do the descriptive details support the meaning of this section of text? Pause while you think. The silence and lack of human presence support the idea that the battle for the city has ended and Richmond is basically deserted. Some words with similar denotation or dictionary definition can have quite different connotations or associated ideas and feelings. Reread lines 524 through 528. Find the word foolish. What are some other words with a similar denotation? Pause while you think. Silly, thoughtless, unwise, imprudent, stupid, dumb, and idiotic all have similar dictionary definitions to that of foolish. What is the impact of the author's choice to use foolish rather than words such as dumb or idiotic? Pause while you think. Those words have more negative connotations and would give a worse impression of Admiral Porter's decision. They also are a bit more informal and do not suit the tone and voice of the text. As President Lincoln entered the Confederate White House, he was accompanied by others who later recorded their observations. Reread lines 561 through 574. Draw conclusions about Lincoln. Based on the details in these paragraphs, what conclusions can you draw about the President's thoughts and feelings at this time? What does the author's use of the word dreamy suggest about Lincoln's state of mind as he sits in Jefferson Davis's study? Pause while you think. He was feeling a combination of relief, sadness, and exhaustion. The word dreamy suggests that he may have found it hard to believe that this day of victory had finally come.